Between 15th and 16th of May, Cardiff Castle held a Roman event. Volunteers played as Roman people to stimulate Roman normal life in that time.
My day job, I work as a curator for a museum in Cambridgeshire, but I do this as a hobby. So we do this at weekends, at events all over the country, and it's great to be here in Cardiff this weekend. From years of kind of reading up about the Roman period, we try and study either Roman original textbooks that survive, from obviously things historians and archaeologists have written, and obviously by looking in museums at surviving examples of many of Roman finds that give us an impression of what some of these objects originally looked like.
My 4-year-old son William loves Romans and bow and arrows and really wanted to see the soldiers today.
We're here to educate and entertain the public by using the image of the Roman soldier.
Dr. Gliver briefly introduced the Roman history background and talked about the people's passion with Roman history behind this event.
So we're in Cardiff, and the Romans came to South Wales in the mid-1st century AD. So they invade Britain in AD 43, and then probably within about 10 or 15 years, they're over in South Wales campaigning. There's a lot of fighting going on, and the Romans really struggle to conquer parts of the area in the first instance, probably partly because it's mountainous, so difficult to get at the Celts, and the Celts resisted the Romans quite fiercely in this area. But gradually, over the course of the latter part of the 1st century, the Romans finally conquer South Wales. It's a really interesting question to think about why people in Wales, who usually identify themselves as Celtic, are interested in Romans and want to commemorate the Romans. And I guess it's partly because it's all part of our heritage. We may regard ourselves as Celtic, but that Roman part of our heritage is also important. But also, studying the Romans has traditionally been part of British history as well, and it links in with Britain's own history of having an empire. So back in the 19th and early 20th century, when Britain had an overseas empire, elite Britons identified themselves with Romans because the Romans also had an overseas empire. I think we do find Roman history fascinating, partly because of that civilization aspect of it, that they introduced bathhouses, and they brought theatres and amphitheatres to Britain.
Volunteers explained the Roman life to the public, but Dr. Gliver said that the impact of Roman culture was limited on ordinary people.
All Roman women were expected to be able to spin and weave enough to clothe their own household, although the very rich would have had slaves to help them. Even the empress would have woven and spun to show an example to other people.
The impact that Rome had on Britain and Wales is quite interesting because it probably impacted the elite, the wealthy, powerful people, rather more than it did the ordinary people. What Rome tended to do was to use existing tribal structures and existing elites and chieftains to rule the areas that they had conquered. So they basically said to people, you can stay in power as long as you help us rule. And the elite tend to learn Latin, to take on Roman culture, to live in Roman-style houses and perhaps to take on Roman dress. Whereas for some of the ordinary people, that kind of spread of culture is not going to impact on them so much. For ordinary people, if they want to interact with the Romans, they're probably going to have to learn Latin. So there was probably a level of bilingualism in that you've got Celtic peoples who know some Latin, can communicate with the Romans in Latin, but there may well have been a lot of other Celtic people who never learned Latin and whose lives weren't changed quite so much by the Roman occupation. They've just traded one chieftain for another master. They still pay taxes, they're still expected to farm their land, the Romans introduced new gods, but they didn't prevent populations from worshipping their existing gods, as long as they didn't go in to outrageous religious ceremonies and going for human sacrifice and that kind of thing. So, for many ordinary people, the Roman occupation may not have had a massive impact.
Although these volunteers presented just a part of real life of Roman history, the visitors got entertainment and history knowledge from this event.